Hey, welcome back to Jetlagged, the podcast all about TCKs and what it's like to grow up overseas. I'm your host, Noah, and today I'm joined by co-host Malia and guest Addy.
Thanks for joining us as we discuss today's topic, commonly asked TCK questions.
Today we will be going through commonly asked TCK questions, answering them ourselves, but mostly addressing how a TCK might feel if asked the question. This episode was sparked by conversations we have had with our friends, but we will hopefully be answering some questions sent in by our listeners as well. A really common one is, do you speak the language of China or Georgia? Or also, can you say something for me in Chinese or Georgian? Addy, how do you feel about this question?
Well, for me, we've been out of China for so long, I don't remember a lot of Chinese, and then the only thing I can say is, 你好，我的名字是方华, which is, hello, my name is Addy. Or for Georgia, I haven't been here long enough, and so I know simple phrases, but it's not that cool when you say, the dog sat on the couch.
Yeah. How do you feel about that, Malia?
Okay, it's basically the same for me as it is for Addy. When they ask you, like, can you say something in Chinese? Usually I forget everything I've learned on the spot, and because I've lived away from China so long, I have lost a lot of the language that I've learned. Also, another question I get asked is, what language do you speak there? Like, some of my friends don't immediately assume that you speak Georgian in Georgia. Like, you can speak Russian or, I don't know, any other language.
Yeah. A funny example of this is Silas, a guest we've had on our podcast on episodes such as Culture Shock and Tanzania, is a common question he gets asked is, do you speak African? Which is funny because African isn't a language, rather Africa is a continent. Another one is, since you were born in China, are you from China? Malia, what are your thoughts on this and how would you answer this question?
From is a very ambiguous word for most TCKs because they don't really have a certain place where they've grew up their whole lives that they know that they're from, because technically they're from America, but they live in another country, and people from America assume that they're from that country, or like if they're not from America, they're from that country.
Yeah.
But people in that country assume that they're from America. So
yeah. Addy, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so for me, I was born in China, and so a lot of people think I might have Chinese citizenship. But the way China does it is even if you were born there, you don't get dual citizenship, unlike America, where if a Chinese person was born in America, then they are considered American. So for me, I'm still American even though I was born in China.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Okay, so next question. Another question we get asked is, what is it like to live in another country? So what do you think about that, Addy?
It's a very broad question. What is it like there, or what's the culture there? There's so many different things that you could talk about, but it's like overall you can't just summarize what's it like.
Yeah.
Or also in some parts of the country it's different than other parts of the country, and it's just hard to group it all together.
So what would be a better question to ask about the country you're currently living in, or a country you have lived in, or what is a favorite question you like being asked? Addy.
How is the community there? How do you get from place to place? I think is a really good question. Is there good mountains or beaches there that you like going to? Favorite foods and stuff?
I think for me personally, it's not as hard of a question because it allows me to engage with the person more, and I can talk for a while. I mean, I could talk for a while with the person, and at the end, I think it allows for a better understanding of you and where you come from. One we get a lot is when we're visiting America is, do you miss living in Georgia, or do you miss living in China? How would you answer that, Malia?
usually if I'm living there in the time when they ask me that, I would be, yes, of course I miss that place. But when you get used to moving to place so often, you it gets easier to let go of those places. So that can be a good or a bad thing, to be able to say goodbye easily. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, how about for you, Addy?
Say, of course you miss the place that you're living in because you consider that place to be home. And that doesn't mean you don't miss America when you're in that place, but you also just really miss the place you're living in. And I think that's another reason why we love airports so much. It's because it's a place in between the two places.
Yeah, I get that. Another one when we are visiting America is, aren't you glad to be home? How do you feel about that, Addy?
America doesn't really feel like home to me, and it's kind of like they're assuming that America is my home because I consider the place I'm living in to be home. But I am so happy to be back in America, and I love America, and I am really happy to be in America, but I don't really consider it home.
Yeah, how about for you, Malia?
Again, this is a question I don't exactly like being asked because it assumes that my home is in America, like Addy said, even though what I really view as home is the place I'm living currently. The longest I've lived in America is like 3 years. So, yeah.
I guess the kind of same for me, though. I don't really view America as my home, but I would say it's kind of like my second or third home, and being China and Thailand being very close to that. Like, I really, really do enjoy being and living in America and being with family and being in our home church and our community there. But I wouldn't consider it my home necessarily, but I really, really do miss it, and I am really, really excited when we get to go back.
Or also, there's certain parts in America that I view as home, like our grandparents' house feels like home, or in our home church feels like home. And so there's certain parts in America that I love going back to, and when you go in, it just feels like home, but not America as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on, a question, or I guess a reaction we all get a lot is, you don't know about certain foods from America, teams, sports, like political stuff. What is y'all's reaction to that, and examples, Addy?
So for me, I once had to have someone explain to me what a Twinkie was. And I also didn't know that you were supposed to put Pop-Tarts in the toaster. I thought you were supposed to just eat them. And I guess you can just eat them. And
they are truly best when put in the toaster.
I know. I didn't know that.
Facts.
So I just ate it. And my sister laughed at me. She was like, Addy, put it in the toaster. And I was like, oh, that's why it was not very good. And also, I saw this comedian, and he was making fun of how people needed instructions for Pop-Tarts and what to do with them. It was like making fun of people who needed to know they would put in the toaster. It was really funny. It was like, but I do need them. But also, it can be good if after they do have a reaction like that, if they actually showed us what it was, so we actually knew and not just like felt like we were left out of it, you know?
Yeah. How about for you, Malia?
Yeah, I had friends once who were shocked that I didn't know what Kings Island was, or what Toys R Us was, or what Chuck E. Cheese is even. I didn't know what that was either.
Yeah. For me, it's like how much different types of candy there are, and like even if you have like nerds and stuff like that, how much variety of different types of nerds there are. It's insane. You go to like a Target or a Walmart, and you just like go through the candy aisle, and it's like, boom, 30 different types of nerds and like 30 different types of Twizzlers and like all this random stuff.
100 types of M&Ms.
Yeah, and another like or Reese's with like the peanut butter and the chip,
so
and then
good.
like that stuff is kind of funny. And it's kind of shocking when you go back to the States and it's like, whoa. Our next two questions sent from us was from Silas. The first one is, why don't you stop making friends if it hurts so much when they leave? What do you think about that, Malia?
Okay, well, I used to be the person who wouldn't make any friends because I'd be, oh, I'm just going to leave them. What's the point of making friends? But now I think that, like I said before, it gets easier to say goodbye, and that can be a good or bad thing. But you shouldn't stop making friends just because you're going to say goodbye to them. Like, those relationships are still, like, valuable.
Yeah, especially today when you have like social media as well as like messaging apps where you can stay in communications with them, as well as since you're older, you get to be like, oh, hey, I'm going to be in America. Let's go meet together. Or we're going to be in this country at the same time. Let's meet, like stuff like that.
It's good to make friends and enjoy them in the time that you do have, because if you don't, you're going to look back on that time as a really sad time when you were really lonely. And even after you do make friends, then you can still keep in contact with them afterwards, and you will have memories with them for lifetime sometimes. And also there's a quote I really like. It's, if you love hard, you grieve hard. And so it's good to love, but if you do, then you will grieve hard.
Yeah, that makes sense. Our second question that we got in is, how many airplanes have you been on? Addy, let's start with you.
That is so hard because I have no idea how many airplanes I've been on. There are too many to count.
Yeah. Like
It is-
an uncountable
You
amount.
can't count how many airlines you have been on.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe a good question to ask instead would be, what is the longest flight you have been on?
Ooh, that is a good question. Especially for me, it's like I left to go to China when I was 10 months, and then like I never like counted the amount of airplanes I've been on,
Yeah.
but I can safely say I've been over 60 airplanes. So that's kind of cool.
That is really cool.
What are some questions that you like being asked, Addy?
I think some good questions that you could ask instead is like, what is your favorite parts about the country you're living in? What has been some culture shock moments you have had since coming back? What is your favorite thing that you have done here since you came back? What is the community like there? Public transport, stuff like that.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Jetlag. Thank you to Malia and Addy for being on this episode, and our producer and editor, Kian. If you like to ask us any questions or leave any comments, email us at jetlagpodcats@gmail.com. That is, again, jetlagpodcats@gmail.com. Cats as in your house pet. Thanks for listening, and we'll hope to see you next time.